Canva just dropped a new feature in Dream Lab that gives you yet another way to create AI images. So what is that new feature? You can now use a style reference to guide your image generation, but how well does it actually work? Does it improve your results, or is it just a gimmick? In this video, I'm breaking it all down. I'll show you how to use it, when it worked best, and some key tricks to get even better results. Okay, let's dive in. On this channel, I've done some previous tutorials on Dream Lab, so I'll try to link those up above and then down below in the comments. But in this tutorial, we're specifically talking about a recent update to this Dream Lab where you now can add an image as a style reference. So how does this work? Is this a useful update to this tool? And then maybe there are some things we can do to make this work even better to get some better results. So we're going to go over all of this in this video. Now to start with, it says right here, references style from an image, and we see coming soon it has a couple other options which we'll talk about on this channel when they come out. And that one here says content reference uses the shape and structure from an image, and the final one says reference vibe or structure from an image. So what does all this mean? The first one here says references style from an image. Well, whenever you have a tool like this, the best way to start to figure out how it works, what kind of results you can get, is to get in there and experiment around. So let's start with that. Let's start by working through a few examples just so we can start to get a feel for how this new addition to this tool works. So you're still going to enter in a prompt like you did previously, and we've talked about that in other videos on this channel about Dream Lab, and I have a visual style guide that's very helpful when prompting, so if you want to get a free copy of that, I will paste a link down in the first pinned comment below. But something to keep in mind, if you're using a style reference, then that is going to be the biggest factor in the overall style of the images you're generating, and it's going to override a lot of what you're writing up here. So prompting is not going to be as important when you're using a style guide, because the whole idea is you're letting the style guide do the heavy lifting. Now this can be a good and a bad thing, as we'll see as we get into this and talk about when this works, when it doesn't work. But let's go ahead and work through an example here. So you're going to write a prompt up here, but first let's add our image. And there are three different ways you can add a style reference. So you can come in here and you can select from recent generations, and it's just going to show you all your recent generations here with the Dream Lab. You can choose any individual image and use that as your style reference. Now you can also come in here and instead you can see your uploads folder in Canva. So it's going to show you all your recent uploads. You can select an image, or the final way you can add a style reference is just uploading directly from your computer. Your iPhone, whatever device you happen to be working on. So I can choose upload file here, and within this folder I have two famous artworks. I have the Mona Lisa and I have Starry Night. Now this brings up an important consideration. Just like with other designs you're going to create, you do have to consider copyright. Even though you're just using this as a reference image, I wouldn't say you can just use anything. Now, a lot of older artworks like this are in the public domain, so I think you could get away with using some of these. And also you want to think about what's your final use. If you're just doing something for, a private family thing that's going to be private, then you probably can use just about anything. But whenever you start talking about commercial work, something you're going to sell, you do have to be careful. You have to be respectful of copyright, and you cannot just infringe on someone else's copyright. So you can't just upload any photo. But things that are in the public domain, things you find here on Canva that are in the public domain, things you may have created with Dream Lab, your own photos, those are all things that you can be comfortable uploading and using here. So I'm going to go ahead and use this Mona Lisa for this example here. We'll go ahead and we'll open that, and that now shows here, and that's going to be our style reference. Now prompting here, I'm going to keep it pretty simple for this first example. So I'm just going to say portrait of a woman. So basically I'm just typing what is in the image here, portrait of a woman. So we'll start with something very simple like that, and we're going to go ahead and create and see how this style reference is now being used as these 4 images are generated. Okay, so it's generated 4 images here, and just by glancing we can see that the color tone and style is pretty similar to what we had here. Now we're going to open one of these in a minute and see that even closer up. But the other thing I'll mention here is I just chose 16:9 for my aspect ratio. You of course can still come in and choose different aspects when you're using this style reference, and then you could come in here and select a style but then you potentially have a style that's fighting against this reference image. And a lot of times the reference image is going to override. So a lot of times when you're choosing a reference image, you're not going to select a style here. And if you've watched my videos before on Dream Lab, I like to take control of that and usually type that in my prompt, or now we're using the style reference, so I don't use this drop down a lot to begin with. Okay, but let's go ahead and open one of these now. So I'll open this one here. We're going to go ahead and edit in a design here. And then on this next page here, I will come in and under this uploads tab here, I have the actual original reference image we use. So here is that image of the Mona Lisa. So we can come in here and see that, okay, if I look at this here, look at the types of things that are in the background, look at the overall color palette here, I can say that, okay, this isn't exactly the same, but I can see how it's attempting to use that color tone, how it's attempting to bring in some of the texture, some of the background elements, the overall feel. So overall, I can see that yes, this is being used as a style reference. Now, is it perfect? No, but I can see how it's working. It's definitely attempting to take the color tones, the other things in the image, and sort of give me that final result. But let's go back here. So let's go back here, and we just asked for a woman before, which is the same subject that was in our reference. So we're going to keep the same reference. But what if I ask for something different now? Let's just say a dog at play. So something different. So what we're doing now is we're changing our subject. We're using the same style reference, and this reference has an image of a woman in it. And now I'm asking for a dog at play using the same style reference. So let's just go ahead and run this again. And I think this type of experimentation is important because as we get into some of these examples, we're going to see how the subject, the background, the colors of the image, those potentially are all going to be a factor as we use this. Okay, so we come in here now and I take a look at this, and okay, this is pretty cool because it did understand that I don't want a woman in my image, even though there is one in the reference images. It's taken the main subject and it's able to replicate it now, but with a different subject. Now we have these images of a dog, but again, we can see that the background elements, it's doing similar things where it's attempting to keep that color palette that's in that reference image. So now we have this image here, and now we've replaced out that subject of a woman with a subject of a dog. Okay, so important to note that it can come into your reference image, it can recognize something as a main subject, and it can sort of replace that with something else. Okay, now it's not always going to get that right, but a lot of times, yes, it is going to be able to distinguish between subject and background and keep the overall tone, but we're not always going to have that central figure in it, the same exact figure as is in the reference image. Okay, so let's take this farther. Let's work a couple other examples. I have a Starry Night image here, so let's just come in here and use that other artwork that we had here as, actually, that was something that I uploaded here in my own folder. So let's take the other artwork here. Let's go ahead and open this, and we're going to go ahead and use this Starry Night. We're going to keep a dog at play for our reference there, just to keep it simple, but we'll go ahead and create again. And so now we're doing the same thing, image of a dog at play, but this time instead of the Mona Lisa, we're using Starry Night as the reference. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and give it a second here. It's going to give us 4 images. And so now we see a dog at play, but now in the genre of that Starry Night. Now let's actually open one of these up. So I'll edit this in a design, and then we're going to come over here and we're going to go under our uploads tab, and let's put the original here just so we can see. If you're not familiar with Starry Night, we have all these swirly cool patterns here. And then if we look at this one here, okay, it's attempting to repeat some of that. Some of it's even coming into our subject here. So the subject's getting affected a little bit too, but it is attempting to put our subject in there. All right, so that's pretty cool. But it's worth noting that sometimes you have to think, is it worth using a reference image, or is that something I can just build into my prompt? Here's what I mean. So let's get rid of the Starry Night. A dog at play inspired by the painting Starry Night. I believe that's Van Gogh, so we'll put Van Gogh just to give it some extra information. I think I spelled that right, but maybe not. But I think maybe I did. But let's go ahead and create and see. So now instead of using the style reference, we're just using words, using our prompt. to ask for that particular style. So again, let's look at these here. And so the reason why I did this is because I want to edit this in a design here. And I want to bring this up here. And then let me just bring up another one here. And on this next page, let me go under my uploads. There's this one. And then let me just go to another page in here. So here's the original, okay? Starry Night. So if we look at that, and then we look at the one I created using it as a style reference, and then the one where I actually just used a style prompt, which is better? I don't know. But in experimenting, sometimes I have found that it's just better to type the prompt. You're not always going to get a better result using a style reference if it's something where you can use words and reference it vocabulary. So using a style reference, don't let it become a crutch where you're always uploading a photo. Sometimes you just need to have the vocabulary to ask it for the art style or mention the sort of art piece that you're referencing. And then sometimes you'll get an even better result than if you use this tool. Now, which of these is better? I don't know. It is a matter of taste, right? So you can try both different techniques and know that now you have two techniques available to you. So it's good to have options. So we like having these options, but don't get stuck in thinking one thing is always going to lead to a better result. You still want to experiment. Now, vocabulary, as I mentioned before, in the comments down below, you can get your free copy of the style guide if you really want to start to learn this visual vocabulary that you can use to get all sorts of different styles when you're using this sort of AI image generation tool. Okay, let's continue to experiment and run some more examples because that's how we're going to learn. That's how we're going to figure out what works, what doesn't work, and maybe some tricks to get better results. So I'm going to add another image here. Again, we're going to do style reference, and I'm going to go to my uploads folder, and I'm just going to choose this paper texture here. So this is a paper texture. So if I was just asking it something simple like paper texture, then we're going to go ahead and see if we just get similar paper textures to that one here. So again, what if you have an asset that you like, but you want variations on that asset? So maybe I like this paper texture, but I don't always want to use this very exact same paper texture. I'd like to have some variations on it. So I'm going to go ahead and do that and ask it for some different paper textures. And it's done that now. So again, maybe if you have an asset you like that's sort of like a complementary asset, you can come in here and ask for some different assets by using a style reference. Now, of course, I could do something like antique paper texture and get different sorts of results. So again, remember, you can use a style reference or you can use an actual prompt where you're telling it what you want. These are all different ways to get results here. So again, don't get committed to one thing. You can try different results. Now, let's return to adding that image again. So we're going to add the style reference. I'm going to grab that one I just added before, so the same one here, and we're going to go ahead and click next. Now, for this is just an image of sort of an antique piece of paper. What if instead of asking for more paper textures, what if I said let's just say a young woman dancing, something like that, whatever you want. So let's go ahead and do that and create. But so now I'm asking for something different. I'm not asking for paper textures, but I'm using that paper texture as my reference. What sort of results do I get then? So let's go in here and see. And so now we can see that it is really adhering pretty strongly to this here. So in other words, the woman in all of this, she really has that faded paper texture. Now I could still maybe come in here and use something like the background remover, the magic wrap to extract her and have this cool textured look. However, maybe that's not what you want. So you have to keep in mind, what do you want? So maybe I want the woman to stand out. Maybe I still want her to be colorful. So let's say a colorful image of a young woman dancing. And then it's going to have that paper texture. So let's see, does that work? So if I go ahead and do that, I'm now asking for a colorful image of a young woman dancing, because in all these other ones, we get this really faded look. Let's see what happens now if I say a colorful image of a young woman. Again, we're using that same paper texture as a style reference. Now, so once again, even though I've asked for a colorful image, it's giving me this really faded look. Now, the reason why I did that, I knew it was going to return that result, is because I want you to realize it's really going to adhere strongly to your style reference. So if you don't have any pops of color in your style reference, if you do not have a main subject, it can still put in a main subject, but it's going to have trouble bringing back that color even though you're asking for it here because it is not part of your prompt. Now, there is a trick for getting around this potentially. Let's go in here and let's go into a new Canva design. So I'm just going to go into Canva here. We're going to start a new presentation file. I will go ahead and bring in that paper texture. So let me go under my uploads here. There's that paper texture. So now, what if I had something like this? Now let me just come in here and under elements, let's search for something like colorful or vibrant. I'm also going to add the keyword woman in here. So we're going to add that in. And now I'm going to bring, let's just pick this woman here. And we're going to go ahead and use the background remover. And we are going to have an image of her on the background. And now I'm going to save it off with her in the background. Now I've actually already done that here. So let me just jump back over to Dream Lab. And now let me come in here and add as my reference. And now I'm going to go under style reference. I'm going to go to my uploads folder and we can say here, right here is that image with the woman on the background. So sometimes what I'm saying to you is to get a better result or more what you're looking for, you may have to come in here and make some adjustments to what that reference image is going to be. If you want a subject that's popping out and you want the background to be a certain way, but the subject to be a different way, you may have to put that together in your style reference. Otherwise, it's not going to be able to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and hit create right now. And since now we have a sort of a subject that's not in that antique style, she's popping out in sort of a regular style against the background. Let's see what it does now with the reference images here. So now we see a colorful image of a young woman dancing. Now we see that we are able to get that, and we do have that paper texture in the background. So again, it's done a lot better. Now, if we look at the images of the woman that it's referencing here, we can see how it is drawing from the look of the subject we use. So this is interesting to note because both the background style and then that main subject style, those both are going to be influences on your final design. In other words, if we had chose a different woman, so let's just go back here. Let's get rid of this woman here. Let's just say red-haired woman. Let's type something totally different in here. Let's just come in here. Here we are going to go background remover. Sure, we'll remove the background. Now let's just save off this image. So I'll save this off and then we're going to load that up as our reference image. So here we are back in here. I'll get rid of this reference image, excuse me. And we're going to upload that new one here. So here it is right here. And we're going to put that in here. And we're just going to go ahead and run this again. So we'll create again. And so now we have the same exact background, but we've changed our main subject, right? And we intentionally did that. And so now when we bring back these images of a young woman dancing, we have a reference that has red hair, that has this white outfit. So now suddenly when we see our images here, now of course, just like all AI, we have some crazy artifacts like this extra hair there. So it's still going to make those common mistakes. It's really making mistakes with her hair there. So that is something to keep in mind. So it is making that mistake with the hair there, but we can see how it's referencing this style image. Now, that is where sometimes the referencing the style image, if we look at that image that I brought in here, we can see how the hair goes way down here. So maybe that is influencing, and one of the reasons why we're getting all this extra hair down here. So the main subject can really influence your main subject that you're asking for, and your background is going to influence the background. But the reason why I'm mentioning this is because if you just use a texture or you just use a color palette as a background, it's going to affect the whole image strongly. Let me show you what I mean by a color palette. So let's come in here and let's add an image. Let's add a style reference. I'm going to go into my uploads folder and I have this one here of this greenery. So it's sort of some ferns in the forest. We're going to go ahead and click next. And I'm going to leave it as a colorful image as a young woman dancing. And if I go ahead and hit create, what do you think is going to happen? Well, I'll tell you what I think is going to happen. I think that green color and this lush sort of forest folia is going to override a realistic woman here. Now, it actually has given us some cool results. And so there is some interesting stuff going on here, but it's really taking that foliage, since that's all we have in our reference image, and making that a huge factor in the final design. Now, it does look like it is successfully rendering the face, some other things here. So this is interesting, and you can get interesting results like this here. I think this is actually pretty cool because it's taken the dress and it's made the whole dress out of foliage. But what you need to understand, now that you start to see how the reference image can really strongly affect something, you'll have to think about, is this the type of creative result I want? Or maybe I do want that forest background, but I want different women sort of dancing in front of it with actual realistic clothing. So because of that, I'm going to need a subject in my main image, that in my reference image, that has a realistic dress on. Okay, so that is something to keep in mind. And of course, with all of these here, remember, you can color for image of a young woman dancing in a red dress. Background is dense green foliage. Okay, and I think I totally spelled that wrong, so there we go. Hopefully here it's still going to recognize, even though I misspelled foliage there, it did recognize. So again, there we go, and we get some results in here now. It all depends on which is going to lead you to better results, and you're only going to know that sometimes through experimenting. But the more you experiment, you're going to start to figure out some of these tricks you're going to need to do to get better results in here with this tool. And sometimes that's going to mean you have to sort of doctor up that reference image so it has both the background style elements you want stylistically, color-wise, and then a subject stylistically, color-wise, okay? Because if you want different color palettes for your main subject and your background, a lot of the time you're going to have that represented in your style reference that you upload, because if you just have something that's monotone, that's all green, then a lot of times you're going to have that on your subject and it's just not going to look realistic. Okay, one more example just to sort of drive home the point where I think sometimes you're going to have to take some extra steps with this tool to get better results and results that might work for you. And then you're going to have to sort of assess whether those results are better enough and worth it enough compared to just saving time and writing out the initial prompt here with descriptive vocabulary. So one more example just to show you what I mean. So let's go ahead and get rid of this here. I started to fool with another example, but let's go in here and we're going to come in here. Let's just start with something simple like a retro style background. So again, sometimes I think you might want to break this down into steps, since I've talked about how the background is going to matter and also the main subject is going to matter. But let's start with a retro style background. So we're going to go ahead and return some retro style backgrounds, and maybe we even have to run this again to get a result we like. So we're going to do something like this. And I sort of like this one here. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come up here. This time we're going to add a reference image. And we're just going to grab that one we just did, so recent generations. So this one right here is the one I sort of dig. So I'm going to go ahead and use that as my retro style background. So again, now I'm going to hit create. So now what I'm doing is I'm taking a reference image and using it to generate these 4 results, sort of to give myself more of a style reference versus just using the vocabulary alone. So when you use the vocabulary alone, sometimes you might get more variety, but if you start to give it a style reference, and it can be from your past generations where you just use vocabulary, but now suddenly I'm using the style reference and I'm getting things a little bit more in line with what I like. Okay, so then let's just say I really like this one here. So I'm going to use this and I'm going to go ahead and edit in a design. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and add a main subject to it, because I want this retro style background, but maybe still for my subject I want something different. So I'm going to go back in here, use this image which we've used before, but maybe this woman here is reminiscent of the type of subject I want to see on my final result here. So I'll go in here and use this background remover. we're going to go ahead and put her in the image because now I want to create something that has this retro style feel and this retro style background, but I want to use her as a reference for the woman I want to be in my final image. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to save this off. So we'll go ahead and click share here. We're just going to save this off as a JPEG. So we'll go ahead and download that, PNG or JPEG, whatever. I'm going to go ahead and click download now. We're going to go ahead and let that download, save it off so we can use this as our style reference. So we'll go ahead and save it there. Now let me come back here. We'll get rid of this style reference and then we're going to upload what we just created there from our own computer. So upload style. Here's this image I just created here. I believe this one here is the one I just created. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to open that. And now we're using that as our style reference, but instead of retro style background, since we already did that part, we're just going to say woman applying makeup, because maybe we're doing some sort of campaign here for makeup that's a retro style colors or whatever. We're going to go ahead and use that. So now we're using this custom background that we created and we're using that as our style reference. And now let's see what sort of 4 results we get from that with it using this as a style reference. So we'll give it a second here to generate the 4 results and then we'll take a look and see. So if I bring these up now, we can see that those style elements that we created, that background, that's really coming into play, but it's also really making use of that main subject. So if we go through here, suddenly we see how we're getting that retro style feel, but we're also getting that feel of the subject we wanted to use. So this is just an example of where I think if you put in the extra work, you can start to get some pretty cool results where you really are guiding the style. Now, if I just typed into here, a woman applying makeup with a retro style background, and then I could say a beautiful black woman or a middle-aged woman, you could start to give descriptors of the subject you wanted and the background you wanted and get to things similar to this. But if you start to find background elements, subject elements that you really like, and you want to return more results, more variations, but keep it in that similar genre, in that style, then that's where you can start to build those in to your reference element, sometimes combining different reference images into one image, and then you can get more and more similar images, okay? So I hope all that makes sense. And again, if you want to get a better feel for the vocabulary you can use, don't forget that visual style guide that I will link down below in the first pinned comment. But this is the new addition to this Dream Lab tool, making it even better, giving you even more options. Now we have this guide your creation with a reference image. Right now we have style reference. And coming soon, we have content reference and image to image. So we'll take a look at that and those once they officially become published by Canva. But in the meantime, grab that style reference, play around with this tool, and in the comments of this video, you can let me know what you like, what you don't like about this new feature as part of the Dream Lab in Canva. Okay, thanks for watching. I'm Greg, and I hope to see you back here soon. Cheers.